the next few years. Got sick, got some dog, got it made.
Well, I guess I'll get started. Thanks, Emma. Um, my name's Adam Derrick. I am the GA for the Pride Center at ETSU, the new Dr. Uh, Pat Robertson Pride Center. Um, so we're very excited to get that started. I am I'm here today to talk as someone who is invested in LGBT work and building up communities. Goodness, I'm getting a little tongue tied already, and it's just us. But um, but yeah, no, I'm new to this. As far as speaking or really being an advocate, but obviously I've been a queer person for my whole life, and I love bringing that perspective and learning and sharing what I know with other people. So I'm excited to be here.
So, Emma, I am Bobby Blevins Fraser. I am here because I'm actually in a public school system in a very much a rural Appalachia area. As far as I know, I've been told I'm the first and only openly gay and also married person to teach in my district. So it's been quite an experience. Uh, I'm here because now, yes, I'm open. I am married. I love it. However, it took me until I was 29. I'm 37 now. Um, until I actually accepted who I was for myself, not just coming out. Just because of the culture and the religion that I've grown up in. So I went back and forth my entire life, even though I knew I was gay, but I was fighting that maybe I can just not act on it up until I was 29 before I finally accepted that. And those first 29 years was hard because I was looking for someone that was like me in my area, and there was not anybody that I could talk to. Everybody was so closeted. I had no idea why I was so different than everybody else. And that led to a lot of depression and issues as I was younger, to the point to where I was sitting at 24 years old with a gun to my head trying to fight this. And now the freedom that I have and the openness that I have and the joy that I have, you know, if I can give that to somebody at a lot earlier age than what I was able to get that, then I'm all for that.
I can go next. Hey there. I'm Mickey White. I'm an assistant professor at ETSU in the counseling program, so Department of Counseling Human Services. I work with Dr. Novotny. And I I have a lot of both personal and professional interests uh, in this topic in particular. So I've been an advocate. I've identified within kind of the queer spectrum for a really long time, and I've done a lot of advocacy work with and on behalf of LGBTQ folks in general. And in the past few years, in mid 2015, late 2015, I came out as trans, and that kind of shifted a lot of my advocacy from more of the sexuality piece to more of the gender identity piece. So that's where a lot of my focus and my advocacy lie in the counseling world. We kind of say the personal is professional, and vice versa. And for me, it really truly is.
I guess I'll go. I'm Jess Klein. I'm coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Dr. Novotny asked me to be on this panel. I've been doing gender work for about 20 years now, and in a lot of different realms, mostly within the violence prevention side of things, domestic violence, sexual violence. But I've done a lot of intersectional work with gender and sexuality, race, culture, and things like that. So right now I do work for the county, doing battering intervention programs for those who use violence against their partners. But we do work directly with a LGBTQ organization that does intervention with queer folks who use violence against their partners. But prior to this, I was working at Carnegie Mellon University, doing gender and sexuality work along with the violence prevention piece. But just like some of these other folks, I've been queer since birth, right? But it's still been a journey. It just depends on where we find ourselves in that journey and on that spectrum. Just like Mickey said, that he starts to feel like some of his life is coming together with the gender and sexuality piece. And sometimes I just don't think that you can separate those things in a lot of ways. So I find myself, I've been navigating sexuality for a long time. But as I get older, I become more comfortable in my gender and it becomes more affirming. And it's a lot easier when, high school students are doing stuff like this. And when I didn't have that, when I was in high school, so I'm here, to learn. And I love that we get to be in this platform because I wouldn't have been able to join and hear what y'all are doing. And so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, everybody, for joining this panel. And we did have some other people registered, but if they couldn't join tonight, this is going to be recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel, along with the other conversations that this group has had previously. So if you want to share this with anybody after we're done, we can provide that link and you can just have them watch the recording on YouTube. So I guess I'll introduce myself. I'm sorry, I had a hard time getting the music off, so I was like fumbling through 20 different tabs that I had open. So I would have jumped in at the beginning, but y'all did great. So I'm Dr. Bethany Novotny, and I am at East Tennessee State University in the Department of Counseling and Human Services. And most recently, I have been appointed the founding director of the Pride Center at ETSU. And it's been a really great experience to come into a new place from Pittsburgh. I know Jess from Pittsburgh when I did my graduate work there. And to come to a new culture and to experience that culture and immerse myself here, and to find a need that has been there for a long time. And I feel like I happened to be in the right place at the right time to do this work and advocate and make the center happen. And so as part of one of the goals of the center is to do community outreach. And so that's where our partnership with CCDP comes in. And we want to provide opportunities for education and outreach to the community. And this is, one of our first big projects. And so I'm really happy to be here and happy to be able to put a great panel together to answer a lot of tough questions. But I will say that this group is amazing. I've presented once already this semester and have been welcomed with open arms and, very attentive ears and hearts and minds. So I'm really happy for that we're having this opportunity to have these conversations. So thanks for being here. All right, Emma, back to you.
Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I'm so glad that you guys could come today and present, but thank you. So Bobby and Jess, would you please share a time, if you have one, when you feel you were discriminated against because of your sexuality?
I guess I'll open us up. Um, I've been very fortunate in my area because everyone did find out so late that I was gay. I was very well known before that, so that did help me not have as many issues as what I've seen other people have. The one that stands out to me the most though was I got married. Um, did not tell anybody at my workplace other than my two or three that I'm friends with outside of school who came to the wedding. Did not tell anyone just because I did not want to make it a big deal. Um, so went off, got married, and of course, there was 10,000 pictures on my Facebook page of all of our friends posting pictures on Facebook, um, which was great. Didn't think anything about it. We got extra pictures for our wedding that we didn't have to pay for. But I showed up after a week of being off and being on our honeymoon and found out that there were two other teachers at my school that had saw these pictures on Facebook, just through people tagging me, and took those pictures to a leader in my school district and was basically trying to get me fired, saying that having my wedding pictures online was inappropriate and that it was unprofessional. So this one of the same people that did that got married maybe a year before that, and her wedding pictures were online as well, but because it was me and my wife, she was trying to get me fired for being unprofessional. Luckily, my district just kind of said, there's nothing we can do about this. But the fact that not only one, but two people decided to take that step, and that, one of those people was actually a former friend who knew that I was gay for about 2 years before I came out. And it was okay as long as I was in the closet. But when I came out and actually got married, it was out in public, she was not okay with that. And that was one of the people who was trying to have my job taken for simply getting married.
Yeah, that sucks. It's nobody's business, right?
Right.
Yeah, mine is interesting because I was very lucky. I was out at a super young age, and my family, yeah, we've hit some snags, along the way, but I've been mostly, accepted. Everything's been cool. But the one area that I found was really tough was partners' parents. And I think about it a lot during the holidays because that seemed to be the time that it always wanted to come to a head, when you want to spend time with your partners, but they have to make the choice between you and your awesome, accepting, loving family and their asshole family who, doesn't really say they don't want you there, but your partner knows that they don't really, and then they get themselves in a pickle in some way because they don't want to say they don't want you there, so holidays with several partners were always a little hard because of the I just wasn't really allowed around, and they didn't want to split their time, and it was always super hurtful. But looking back, I think I'm more upset sometimes at myself for not telling them to fuck off, at the time as my partner, which I would never say to a partner, but looking back, it was painful, and I would never be with anyone anymore ever again whose parents were not cool with it, or at least looking at how does your partner respond in a situation like that, right? I'm not telling anyone to not talk to those family members, but are you still splitting the time? So it was really tough to be able to navigate that when it's coming from that place.
Yeah, and let me just chime in to kind of synthesize. The two of you both, experienced something that felt, it feels like a personal attack And
Oh.
one thing that always comes up in my presentations and things when I talk about this topic is, chronic minority stress, and kind of this idea that I always have to worry about what's going to happen next. I always have to worry about feeling like somebody's going to reject me, or I'm going to have a negative reaction if I disclose information about my sexuality or gender identity. And so that's a really important factor. Is it's not just about outright prejudice and discrimination that happens. That does happen. But what also happens is microaggressions, these kind of um, subtle things that happen that tell us we're not welcome, or just the anticipation that that might happen, can also be really stressful. And so I think that's something to mention as well.
Yeah.
Emma, back to you.
Again, thank you for sharing that with us. I bet it's really hard to have to go through that for all of you. Adam, Bobby, and Jess, can you tell us of a time when you felt fully included and any impact it had on you?
Adam, you want to start this one out?
I will absolutely start this one out.
All right.
So I have two stories, one about sexuality and one about gender identity. The first time I really realized what full acceptance really looked like or felt like was the first time I ever attended a Pride event. I was 24. I had moved to Austin. I'd gone through college, and I had friends, and I had been out, and I, had talked to people, and people knew me. But there was always that toxic stress, that question, or I was always censoring myself in some way, at work, with friends, at school, everywhere. I go to my first Pride event. It's in Austin. It's a full day thing. It's a festival all day, and then there's a parade at night. And it was an emotional day for a lot of reasons. Um, you know, I was new to the city. I was making new friends. This was something that I was scared of celebrating about myself. Um, and it's been a beautiful day. We get to the parade, which in Austin is at night. And there are all of the floats going down, and there reaches a point where it's just like the free mom hugs like group of people, and they're just somebody's parents, and they're just shouting, "We love you, we accept you." And oh fuck, I'm gonna cry now. I literally had to leave. I had to go like a block away from the parade by myself and just cry because I didn't realize I was missing that for 24 years. So yeah, um, it's it's kind of an overwhelming thing, the stuff you get used to and the stuff you realize that other people just take for granted, like being totally accepted. Um, my gender identity is something that took a lot longer for me to explore and understand. I identify as non-binary. Um, and the first time I really felt fully accepted in that actually happened earlier this year. I was visiting a friend, and before I even really, I had just briefly mentioned that I was exploring being non-binary with my friend, and as they were introducing me to all of their friends, and like I was meeting a bunch of people, I was just being constantly referred to with they them pronouns, and like I just kind of got thrust in to accepting this role for myself that I was still just exploring, and realizing how good it felt to be validated in that way. And really that was the time that I understood that that was real for me. It took other people seeing and valuing it in me before I could see and value it in myself.
I guess I'll go next.
Thank you so much for that, Adam. Those free mom hugs get me every time. Just tears just down my face. All right. Sorry, Bobby, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was about to say the same thing. Free mom hugs just absolutely just kill me in such a positive way. My parents are not accepting. I do have a relationship with them, but they were not at my wedding. One of my absolute best friends, I call her my mama Vicky. She's old enough to be my mom, but she was who gave me away. So the first time we had Pride in the Tri-Cities was just 3 years ago. And the first time that Free Mom Hugs walked up to me, I'm like you, I completely lost it. It took a while to recover from that. But the story that I had in mind about being accepted, like I said, I was 29 before I even was able to have a real relationship, just because of going back and forth with myself. I was 32 and was ready to come out, and I had 4 or 5 people in the know that knew that I was gay. But I came across a situation at school where I heard through the grapevine about a student in the upper grades that was being bullied because another person that she was friends with, she told them that she thought she might be gay, and that student then started to blackmail her and was having her do homework and things for him because he said that he would out her if not. So I said, I heard about this through the grapevine. So of course, I'm a fixer. I want to do something about this. So our school counselor and I, we were acquaintances, not really friends outside of school, but I thought she was absolutely fantastic with the students. So I got into a position where I kind of had to out myself to her to let her know what was going on and why this hit me so hard about this that I had heard was going on within a school. So I was nervous wreck. I sent her a Facebook friends request and responded back and asked her to call me that I had something to talk to her about with school. And it was the first person that I wasn't very close to that I came out to. So I didn't really know how that was going to go. And it went absolutely fantastic. It could not have went any better. And it made she and I actually really close to where she is one of my best friends now. She attends Pride event with me every year. Her and her son, who I now call my little nephew, they're at Pride event every year with me. And she's crossed over that line of just being a friend, where I have friends who are very accepting, but then you also have those straight allies to where they're not just friends, they don't just accept you, but they also will fight for you. And there's a very big difference there. So if that would have went like I had it playing out in my mind, in a very negative way, I'm not sure how I would have been moving forward as far as coming out to people that I wasn't sure how the response was going to be.
You're muted, Jess.
I said, anytime that you can be affirmed and feel affirmed, it just feels good, So, there's been lots of times in my life, there's moments where, the Supreme Court does something good and you're like, yes, and you feel affirmed by all your Facebook friends cheering you on, right? Or it can be that the mom hugs, or it can just be that one-on-one conversation, or it can be like being brought into someone's family. There's a lot of different ways, but for me personally, one was going away to college, and that's really what affirmed so much of who I was. I think, I grew up being the only queer kid that I knew, right? So as Bobby mentioned, the straight folks in your life, the allies, that can affirm you. But I just have to tell this little story because this just happened a few weeks ago. My grandparents are still kicking it, and My grandma like doesn't quite get the whole gay thing, but she like knows it exists and it's in our family, you know, not just me. And so she tries, but like about 4 weeks ago, you know, she was asking me, I was on the phone with her. She asked me what I was teaching. And I usually just say like sociology, you know, but this time I said gender studies. I was like, I'm going to be honest with her. You know, I said, I teach gender studies. And her first response was she's like, oh, I love that Pete Booty Bag, which is what she calls him, Pete Booty Bag. And, but it's Pete Buttigieg, obviously. But like, even that, I know what she's trying to say, because then she started talking about Anderson Cooper on CNN and he's gay and how much she loves him. And like that was the connection that she made. And she tried to say LGBT. I had to finish it for her, but she has never once in my life tried to say something like that. She always loves anyone I bring home. You know, they always get a Christmas gift and it's always fine. But there's something about that, even though Pete has his issues, you know, with a lot of other things, I could relate to what she was saying to me at that moment. And those moments really, really, really matter. So you're never going to be able to hear his name the same way. It's always going to be Booty Bag from now on. Just wait.
Thank you so much for sharing those stories. I like put a smile on my face and everything. So our next question is, Nikki, are there any current pieces of legislation you feel like are valuable or harmful that the audience should be aware of or advocating for or against?
Yeah, so I saw this question and saw that nobody else had put their name on it and had this moment of like, fine. But then I realized that this is actually something I enjoy like learning about and digging into. So it's actually kind of great. So there are a couple, you know, the legislation session is just all messed up right now because of COVID, and they're meeting but not meeting, but talking about things but not talking about things, more so than they usually do, because they always do that anyway. One of them, though, that got passed in January is, and was signed into law by the governor, is that so state contractors, folks that take in taxpayer funds for child welfare and adoption agencies can refuse couples or refuse families the right to foster or the ability to foster or adopt children if their beliefs don't align with the agency's religious beliefs. So it's essentially anti-LGBTQ adoption law, but they frame it within sincerely held religious beliefs. One of the big issues with that in general is agencies that it's the issue of that it's taxpayer funded agencies, right? So we talk a lot and we hear a lot in school of like separation of church and state, and this is a very clear violation of that, right? So there's potential ramifications for that to continue to unfurl. You know, in Tennessee, there aren't protections against discrimination in housing discrimination, in employment discrimination, in pretty much any way, shape, or form related to sexual or gender identity. So, Bobby, I was really glad to hear about you having a positive experience, because that could have gone.
It could have went really, really bad.
Yeah. And so you know, and there's even just limited federal protections. Like the federal protections really aren't really that great, and they've been scaled back a ton. They've been cut back a ton. As far as kind of what's on the docket right now, one of the biggest ones that it's been deferred to committee, so it means that it's still there. It's still kind of sitting. It could go somewhere. It could kind of stall out and die. is HB 2575 or SB 2215. And those are anti-trans medical care bills. So that essentially makes it illegal, I think up to a felony punishment for providers to give care to gender affirming care to trans teens and adolescents. So anybody that has hit puberty, even with consent of the parent. And so it also labels seeking out care for your trans child as child maltreatment and abuse, which has a lot of implications in it as well. So that's one definitely to keep an eye on. There's another one in schools related to gender identity and athletics in particular. So saying that you have to match, you can only play sports that match your biological sex. And Tennessee is one of the few states that doesn't allow folks to change their gender markers or their sex markers on their birth certificate. So there's no way to change that. There's no way to make that different. Whereas I was born in Texas. So in Texas, you can change your sex marker on your birth certificate. It's a lot of hoops to jump through and it's not cheap, but I was able to do that. So now all of my documentations match up as male. And then another one, I think another one that is really ridiculous and it's also in line with a lot of what RISE works with as well is sexuality education materials available at public libraries. So it has to be age appropriate and it, what does it say? Each public library would be required to establish a parental library review consisting of 5 adult residents of that geographic area. And so those residents would get to vote on if something was age appropriate sexual material to be in the library. But age appropriate sexual material, you know, they're not talking about like porn books or things like that. They could even say that a book with same gender couple or a book that had a non-binary character or something like that would be inappropriate. So it offers a lot of potential leeway for that discrimination. And then the last one is Tennessee, bless its heart, is still attempting to overturn constitutional marriage equality. So they have 2 bills that have come up on the docket to try to define marriage as being between one biological man and one biological woman, whatever that means. And even though it's, you know, it's interesting that it's still in the Tennessee Constitution that same-sex, their quotable words, same-sex marriage is not constitutional or not legal, but at a federal level, it is. So it's those things that it's a lot of like the language that we see. So whenever you see language that has like natural, so they say like marriage between one woman and one man is what's natural marriage, and anything trying to strike that down is like they're trying to come up and say this is the way that it should be. They tend to, it, you know, just in terms of like kind of what to watch out for too is like they will bury this stuff within other bills. So they will bury, you know, I think at one point, this was back in Texas, but at one point they tried to bury within a bill for education that was really important and really needed and had a lot of support. They tried to bury this language of saying that a person's gender identity is only congruent with their biological sex. And it had nothing to do with the bill. It had nothing to do with what that was about. So you'll see it's interesting to just something to kind of keep an eye on as you're looking at bills and as you're looking at legislation and things like that, because it's something that sometimes if a bill seems too good to be true, like it's going to do a lot of good, particularly in an area like Tennessee, then it's probably got something under it that we may want to look at.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I had no idea about the library thing. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Also, thank you, Jillian. She put a link in the chat for Tennessee laws if you want to look more into it. So moving on, please tell us, Bobby and Jess, in what ways can the community as a whole better support the LGBTQ plus community? What support do you wish was available? Institutions are most in need of reform, etc.
Oh my gosh, where do you even begin? I mean, I think the first things first, you have to understand that this is not, queer folks are not a monolith, meaning that we don't all need and want the same things at the same time. You know, for some people, queer marriage or same gender marriage, same sex marriage was, you know, like that was the most important for a lot of queer folks. And for others, it was like, let's get trans protections. And for others, it's like, let's bathroom bill, you know? So it's really hard. It's such a great question, you know, but one with a million answers that just depend on the community itself. And I guess I would say, first things first, we need to be able to come together and protect the most vulnerable in the LGBTQ plus spectrum, and that is our Black trans women specifically. And so, you know, I definitely think that we have to look at the marginalized populations within the LGBTQ plus population to figure out, you know, what is really needed. Because me personally, I rather see like violence against trans women stop than get married, even though I want both of those things, you know. But it's so hard to say, like, do you want this or you want this? Whereas, why can't we combat all of these things, you know, all of these things together? I think the other thing is really important. It goes back to just basic education. And there's still people who don't know the difference between sex and gender. And I think sometimes the queer community comes from an ivory tower perspective, where we're, you know, being as queer folks, we're throwing around words like intersectionality and sex and gender and, you know, and all this stuff, where people are like, wait a second, like, you can kiss a guy and not be gay? Okay, wait a minute, you know, like, so you have people on 12 million different spectrums with their understanding of gender and sexuality. So if we're talking about like a fundamental level of how you can support a community, it is with the word that Bobby said earlier, is being an ally or an accomplice, or figuring out how to hear the needs of that community, educating yourself on the differences between sex and gender, and knowing that sexuality is different than gender identity. And sometimes those things come together and sometimes they don't. But we need to stop looking at all of those things as one thing, and as like queer people as one thing, because there are actually plenty of queer folks who you know, are racist or are sexist or who are transphobic, right? So we even have those issues within our own community. So to not look at our community as a whole and like put blanket things on there for how they think that, you know, or what they think that we want, but looking at us as individuals and thinking, all right, which ones within this community are the most marginalized? I think that's where we have to start, personally.
I think she is absolutely right as far the whole thing. I'm a hit on the education part just because I am in a public school. I am 48 pages into my dissertation study right now for my doctorate, and it is on this very issue of public schools and LGBTQ students in rural Appalachia. You know, I said I live back in, you know, deep rural Appalachia, to where everyone is straight, white, and a Christian. and you cannot vary from any of those, or you are the them. Okay, you are not part of the we, you are the them if you stray from any of that. So I got my idea for my dissertation actually from someone that we never dated. We went back and forth a little bit, and she was telling me about her in high school. She was a junior, and her father was a preacher in the community. Not this one, but someone at school, a teacher, found out that she was gay and she was dating another girl at her school. So the teacher took it upon herself to call home and tell the preacher father that his daughter was a lesbian. So she had no idea about this and walked into her house, and he ended up beating her to the point that she spent almost a month in the hospital. And then when she got out of the hospital, she had nowhere to go. She was not allowed back at her house. So she basically couch surfed for the next 2 years until she got out of high school. So that story hit me hard as a public educator. And I, of course, immediately I was nothing but mad. But I started looking into it from a doctorate and a research level, and started to realize I don't think that teacher ever intended that to happen. You know, in that culture and that religion that she is in, really thought that she was helping this girl, and that, you know, she was going to save her, she was going to call her father, and was going to get her back on the right path. And really had no idea about the education part of that, that, you know, you're going to get a kid killed. You know, you're going to get somebody really damaged, emotionally, physically, in every possible way. So my dissertation is focused in on providing these rural Appalachia educators actually education on LGBTQ plus community, so they can see the stats that I'm seeing. So they may or may not agree with it, but they would at least know the harm that they're about to cause before they do something like that. By what I'm going through my stats, probably the most disturbing one that I found was that it was a 2012 study, if I'm not mistaken, and it said that 92% of principals report hearing anti-gay, anti-lesbian, anti-trans language in their school, but yet only 21% actually started putting in policy and changes to help combat that. So you're looking at just that mathematics does not go very well in our favor, that these students are in this atmosphere that is just completely negative all the way around. And that can lead to, I mean, depression, suicide, and that is the start, and that's the catalyst of a lot of issues. So I feel like if we can get some training in to public educators in those more rural areas that don't have as much diversity in their community and in their culture, then that might start to bridge the gap a little bit. Also, a second part of that is colleges. I mean, I'm on my fourth college right now, and I've spoken to a total of 54 colleges while doing my dissertation, and every one of them are reporting the same thing. LGBT topics are basically brushed on for maybe one lesson within your entire master's or doctoral degree. So you've got principals or superintendents leading schools that have no education about this very specific group of minority students. So if you don't know, you can't do any better. So to start there, I think would be a good starting point.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say, someone in the comments, Dolly, fighting for your child and the gender neutral pronouns. I think it, goes back to what Bobby just says, is when you're trying to explain the harm you're causing by not doing something, like what other way can you come at it? Because I can't come at it from a way of like, you just need to like respect what people want to be called, because clearly that's not working. So you have to like finagle your language to even get people to see that this is a big deal and this can cause more harm. And it's you got to be political about it, you know, and use your words about it. It's ridiculous. So Bobby, that's really cool research you're doing. That's real cool.
Yeah, and so needed. It's really needed. I want to throw.
Here they are. Well, hi.
We were just talking about you. Hey, maybe. I don't know. You might have more than one kid.
Oh,
Okay. I'm gonna throw a little wrench into this and a curveball to everyone. So if you were to just sum up, if someone wanted to know, I mean, there's no silver bullet, there's no one perfect piece of advice to give people, but for anyone that's listening or right now or watching this later, just one sentence, one phrase, one piece of advice that you can give them that might be helpful to hear. That's to all the panelists.
Are you asking who's our audience?
That's what my question is.
Everyone.
Because there'd be something different, I would say, to, you know, people who identify or maybe want to come out versus allies, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's say people who are not in the community, who are looking to be an ally, looking to learn.
I swear, take a gender studies class. That is my advice. Take a gender studies class if you can, if you're at an institution. I know that is a privileged perspective, but you know, if you have that opportunity, it opens up. You know, you got the educational piece. You have a classroom with other people of like-minded individuals who will challenge you, but not in like a jerk kind of way, you know. But that educational piece is really important. So important. So college students, take a gender studies class.
I was going to say something kind of similar, but targeted not necessarily at people who are in an institution. YouTube is your friend. There are so many resources out there, and vloggers, people who share their coming out stories, people who talk about, you know, why their pronouns matter to them, people who, you know, have advanced degrees and are coming at it from a statistical perspective, but just putting it online for free for anyone. It's out there. Look it up.
Mine is always embrace your discomfort as an opportunity for growth. I think that being uncomfortable, feeling like you don't know where to start, it keeps people from digging in. And we need people to dig in. We need people to go out and try to, you know, get some education on the topic, to talk to people who are different from them. And that's how we learn, and that's how we grow, and that's uncomfortable. But once we are okay with being uncomfortable, then we really truly allow ourselves an opportunity to be better and do better.
I think the talking to people is definitely a big part of that. Building a relationship with someone different than you is better than anything that you can read. You know, having that relationship, no matter what you've been taught or stereotypes or what culture's told you, when you build a relationship with somebody, that's when you truly get to see. And you know, one of my friends, after I came out as being gay, it was months later, and she looked at me kind of funny one day and she said, "I'm not supposed to like you, but I do." And that was the most honest answer that she could ever say, because we were having a heartfelt discussion about what she was taught, and it did not match up to who I was as a person. So I think relationship is the building blocks of all of that.
I think that I would echo all of that, and really just I think what I hear the most is a fear of getting it wrong, or a fear of screwing up, or a fear of saying the wrong thing, and that, you know, that's okay. That's going to happen. You know, somebody I think once shared with me that the first thought that comes into your head is often what you were socialized, often what you were raised to think, and often what you spent years and years consciously and unconsciously learning. And then the thought that follows that is yours. The thought that follows that is where you're moving towards and where you want to be. And so being able to recognize that and being able to, like Bobby said, have those relationships, and be able to explore and be able to understand that it's okay if you don't understand, if you don't get it. Like, no one's asking you to implicitly get something that's not your experience, but know that that other person's experience is real and is valid too.
Thank you. I love that. The first voice, second voice thing. It's good. Thank you all for sharing and going off script a little with me. Emma, go ahead. You can go on to the next question.
You guys are gonna like make me cry or something. I'm trying my best not to cry on screen here. But anyway, okay, on to the next question. Mickey and Bobby, can you speculate why there is a greater number of suicide attempts in tobacco and other substance use in the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah. So every time I hear this kind of question, or I see this kind of written, because, you know, it being, I did my dissertation last year, 2019. Yeah. It's been a really long year. When I finished my dissertation, when I was going through it, it was this, you know, you're in this literature and you're seeing all of the way that this stuff is written through a deficit-based perspective. And so why are LGBTQ folks, but also adolescents, using substances at higher rates, or having a higher number of suicidal ideation, or having a higher number of suicide attempts? And it's not so much, you know, that's coming from this idea of like there's something wrong, and that speaks also to what Dr. Novotny was talking about of minority stress. That extra stress, that excess pressure keeps coming in and coming in and coming in, and that it never truly feels like there's a way out. So substances are a way to cope. Substance use is a way to cope with discrimination. So we see higher substance use rates among marginalized and minoritized folks, regardless of what the marginalization or the marginalized identity is. But I think there's also a history here, when we look at particularly queer history, that a lot of our history kind of stems, in what we know of largely, stems from Stonewall. And that our socialization and our way to be ourselves and our way to connect with other people was at the gay bar. And that's still true, you know, still true now, and it really shouldn't be, but, you know, COVID and all of that. But that's still so much of our socialization, because that's the space we can go. That's the space we can be free. You know, I grew up in the drag scene. I grew up with, you know, queerlesque rather than just drag, like traditional drag. But that arena intentionally played on gender in a way that helped me see and express my own gender and to understand myself better. But the problem is that in those scenes, there's ready access to alcohol, there's ready access to drugs. And that's just part of, you're connected to a bar with that. And so when you have this easy access, something that has historically been the only place you can go, the only place you can be seen and be safe, and you've got this minority stress that really wants an escape. Like, we want to feel good, we want to escape, we want to not worry about it. That substance use rates increase, right? So it's part trying to escape, it's part social and societal pressures, and then it's part that we have this history that has told us this is the only place we can escape. And we have a society that is still telling us there's nowhere out here that you can be you and you can express yourself unless you're at this place, unless you're in this area. And so I've a lot of folks that have struggled with substance use, and I've known a lot of folks that continue to be part of queer scenes that still mainly revolve around drinking or still mainly revolve around drugs, and be able to stay sober. So that is a reality, that's a lived reality. But we need more sober spaces, like intentionally sober spaces for LGBTQ folks. And we need to talk more about kind of the history and the association that comes in together, and how so many folks also feel pressured, right? So you, particularly adolescents, like, you already feel pressure, and then when you're feeling excess pressure, it just compounds. It's just exponential growth of pressure that you're trying to cope with, and you're also trying to avoid at the same time, because there's not as much support. Like, there's a GLSEN, the Gay and Lesbian Education Network. I can't remember the whole name, but they had a study about schools, and that having one supportive adult mitigated the risk of suicidality, but also mitigated the risk of substance use significantly. One adult that wasn't even part of their family necessarily. So being able to have, all of this rant coming to kind of a resilience-based approach of, it's not just about the higher number of suicide attempts or the higher rate of substance, but it's about what social and structural supports aren't there and aren't that LGBTQ folks don't have access to for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and I want to touch on something that you said that's really, I think, very important, and I want to highlight it just in case anybody missed it. But you started by saying that some people could look at those statistics and make a case for saying there's something wrong with them, and they're trying to deal with that, right? And I think that you clarified really well that it's just about the way that we're framing this, in that we can address it and ask different questions to talk about resilience, to talk about the strength that comes from having added minority stress in these experiences. And Bobby, thank you for sharing earlier about, being vulnerable and saying that you had a moment of suicidal ideation. I had a similar background, struggled with depression, had suicidal ideation and non-suicidal self-injury. And it feels for me sometimes like people would look at that and maybe, like I said, use it against me in a way, to say, that's because you knew you were doing something wrong or something like that. And it's very much not the case. I was struggling. I was trying to conform to everything that everybody told me was right, and had to unlearn everything that I was socialized to think. And a lot of that was based in religion, growing up in a religious household. And I had to listen to that second voice, and listen to, like, I know at my core who I am, and I know what's true for me. And the battle, at least, for me, and I know for a lot of other folks, is coming, is living your most authentic self, is really embracing those parts that we know are who we are at our core, and our and excuse me, sorry. And so I'm sorry if I got off on a little rant, but I think I just thought that was an important point. It jumped out to me, and I don't know if it was just me, but that's it. Thanks. Bobby, did you want to also comment on that particular question?
I think you two wrapped it up perfectly.
Okay.
It's all about, it's all about representation and, acceptance. I said, I can speak on rural Appalachia. That's where I grew up at. That's where I'm at now. And, around here, you got church, you got family. That's it. So when neither one of those are supportive, which is where a lot of people run into, you have no one to talk to. You have no one to reach out to. You have no one to ask questions to. And that could be a very dangerous place, especially for adolescent growing up and going through everything else these kids are going through, and then struggling with those questions and concerns on their own. So that gets to be a very dangerous aspect of this whole thing.
Sorry if you saw me smile. I saw Jillian put in the chat, and that is why we need a GSA, because that's why I really want to get it started. Is a gay straight alliance will really help schools open up and make sure that this isn't happening in schools. Moving on. So Adam and Mickey, talk a little bit about language. Are there things that are always inappropriate? Things that you prefer or wish people knew about the impact of the language they use?
Okay, I'll get started with this one. Man, this is a big question. There's so much you can say about language. So I have a few things that I kind of want to touch on, and then maybe Mickey will be able to make sense of my words and actually make a point out of it. We'll see. The first thing I want to talk about with language is pronouns. Pronouns are super, super, super important. There are all some of the most commonly used words in the English language. And so just getting someone's pronouns right is one of the easiest ways that you can very simply tell them that you respect them and that you see them as a person just like you. I don't know that I could talk a lot more about that, but I'll move on. I also, when we're talking about language, want to just remind myself again. I think someone, I forget who was talking earlier about the coming at this from like an ivory tower. I think it was Jess, and that we use a lot of terms that people may not understand. And you can go through whole lists of labels and identities and things, and there's always a new one, and there's always new things to learn, and there's always new words that queer people are coming up with and using to describe our experiences because of the marginalization and because of the toxic stress and because we have to be creative in the ways that we share those things. And I just want to give permission to people who are maybe just coming into this space or don't know all of those words, that that's okay. I don't expect anyone to know all of the different terms. I don't know them all myself. And just so wherever you are in that process, when you come across a new word, if someone is sharing with you, hey, I identify as queer, and you come back and you say, oh, I thought that was that was a wrong word. I thought that was a bad word to say. That's a valid conversation to have. That's a valid question to ask. And that person can then share why they use that word and why that word is important to them. So it's all about relationships, like Bobby mentioned earlier. And so getting past the language and just focusing on the people can be very, very important and very valuable. And then the last thing I wanted to just touch on, because I think this was perhaps the intent of the question to begin with. I can think of a few things that I keep hearing that people who are maybe well-meaning say that just rub the wrong way. And I'll touch on those. Again, people are human. If you're using something that someone then just says, hey, that doesn't work, that's not coming across how you think it's coming across, that's just a learning moment and it's not a big deal. But I do hear around here sometimes people will say transgendered, verb, past tense. It's not the right way to talk about that. It's not something that happened to you. It's who you are. Someone is transgender. They have not been transgendered. And the other one that comes across a lot, more on the sexuality side, is talking about the lifestyle. And that's just very broad. And also very narrow. It basically assumes that everyone who is queer has these same habits and these same behaviors and these same places they go and these same things that they believe. And that's just not true.
Every time, I don't know if it's just me, but every time I hear that as well, depending on the context, but I also hear like perverted in the front of it, even if it's unsaid. Like I hear that there's this
There's a connotation.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like someone's saying it in a way that's condescending or judgmental.
Or it comes off as, even if it's not perverted, it comes off as like, and I've heard this, alternative lifestyle, which assumes that heterosexuality and cisgender identity is the norm and is what is normal and right and okay, and anything different is not. So it's this what's the implicit message behind the language?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just keep going, Mickey.
Yeah, Mickey, great transition. If you want to add anything here.
I actually think so. This one was actually, I think, Jess's, so I'm going to let her take it.
Yeah. I think Adam summed it all up well, like perfectly. There's just a couple things I want to add to what he said, because I think his points were great. And one, I think you're mentioning that the language is always evolving. So I'll give you a for instance. The word queer is not something I ever would have called myself. I just didn't like it. It's what the kids were saying, but I wasn't a kid, and I didn't like it. But as I get older, I'm 35 now, and I started to adapt it for myself over time, but that was something, I didn't use. And it was also something that people didn't really understand why it was being used, because it used to be used in a very negative way. At the same time, the word queer can still be used in a very negative way, depending on who it's coming from and depending on who it's aimed at. So it can't always be like reclaimed as this really beautiful word. It can still be used to harm, right? And I swear I'm going to go around now saying lesbian. And I don't know why I never have before. Like, why have I never said that? Because when I have the same reaction as you, Adam, when people say transgendered, I'm like, interesting.
I had somebody say transgendering once, and I just kind of blew my mind.
Transgendereds, I've heard that. Yeah. Adding, very strange. But I mean, it is it is what it is. But yeah, it's the language that we're just trying to, get used to. And the other thing, and Adam kind of touched on this, it is just very personal for a specific person. And I think what also comes into language is that we as queer folks have a different understanding of this language over time, and we evolve at our, when I was coming out, I was 13 years old, and the only word I knew was gay. I didn't know the word lesbian. I had to like learn what that was like after I came out as gay, and I was like, well, I guess I hate that word, but I guess I'll use it because that's what society uses. And that's how they understand who I am, is that I'm a lesbian, even though I don't really identify with that word. The other thing that people would look at me and might think I'm butch, right? Like I usually wear ties and sweater vests and all this kind of stuff, but I don't like the word butch. I don't like getting called that within my own community. I understand what it means for other people. That's cool, but that's not for me. I also I use the word dyke. I think it's an amazing word. And for me, it reminds me of all the women specifically and trans women who use that word to identify themselves. As a point of pride and power. And but I don't want to be called that by anybody. Like, they better not say that to me, right? But for me, it's very much a word that I use to describe myself proudly. So it really all depends on someone's personal preference, and also thinking about the like cultural and societal implications of what was happening at that time. There are so many words for gay and trans and queer and all these different sexualities that they haven't been invented yet. And that's what's so cool and also so frustrating about language. So we have to do our best to use the words that people want us to use, even if we don't understand it, even if we think it's weird. It's what someone wants. It comes down to just personal respect of an individual. And when you get down on that level, sometimes it's easier for people to get it, but it's tough. Language is tough.
All right, Emma, I'm gonna let you go on to the next question, but I do just want to give us a heads up that we're running a little low on time, and I want to respect everyone's time. So just panelists, if you could try to keep your responses a little concise at this point, that would help us get done on time.
Okay, so Bobby and Jess, what advice do you have for responding to people when they say being LGBTQ+ is a sin and or a choice?
So this is probably my favorite question of the night. And it's one that I've had to work through myself because I am very much a person of faith. I've been on a total of 4 mission trips, working through helping some older people repair houses. I've been to Mexico, helping deliver food and supplies to children that were living in a landfill. So very near and dear to my heart. Also, a very source of pain over the years. And while I worked through that aspect of 2 different parts of who I am. So, of course, how I am, I love to just dive into research and learn about something. So when I was messing with this idea in my head of, okay, well, I'm a lesbian and I'm also a Christian, and those 2 things do not match up. I dove into research and actually found someone, her name is Kathy Baldock, with a K. She is a fantastic resource. She is that like straight white Christian woman that I was talking about earlier, that's everywhere out in rural Appalachia, and completely changed her viewpoints on this with the church, and now is a huge leader within the community. So I dove into this and found out all kinds of information about going back to the original Greek and Hebrew Bible. So when I did this, and then someone would come at me with those those accusations that I'm just being manipulated by the devil, or I'm a product of Satan that's going out and sending people to hell. At first, I would get very mad and would start going back at them with scripture. I started saying the words like Malakoi and Arsenicoitai. They had no idea what I was talking about. Their defenses were up. So I had to mature over time and start to bring it back and realize that it goes back to the relationships. You can sit and argue scripture with somebody until you are blue in the face. What they've been taught, the Bible says, is so ingrained into culture, especially in a rural area, that as soon as you start talking with them about you may have been taught this wrong, automatically their defenses are up and they're not listening to anything that you say. So I have learned to go back to the relationship part. If I can create a relationship with someone and they figure out that, again, it doesn't match up with what they were taught. I am not this godless heathen running around trying to send people to hell just because I am married to a fantastic woman. Then that defense shield goes down and you may actually be able to have a conversation with someone. And my advice on that is, if you do want to go that route with someone, whether it be a friend, a loved one, prepare yourself and educate yourself. It's going to be some very hard questions, not just for you to explain to them, but for you to accept for yourself. With me, I had to go back and kind of deprogram myself. I like to say that I kind of feel like I got put out of the matrix whenever I started learning about, the original Greek and Hebrew Bible. And it's just it's a web of information that you kind of get sucked into when you get into that. So my advice is start with that relationship first. Do not try to argue scripture. It's not going to end well with someone that you know and someone that you love. It will just put up more of a barrier and a wall. But if the relationship is there first, then you can have that conversation.
Yeah, I just want you said everything. I mean, I'm not a person of faith, but I think it's important to address this question. One, from a perspective of like, is it our responsibility to answer that question? I totally agree with everything Bobby said, especially that the relationship matters more than the things that you're saying. And I think we're seeing this right now with Trump supporters. This is how you deal, right? Like, but also you don't have to. And so for me, I choose not to engage. One, because I don't have a stake in the fight. I don't know anything about religion. I just know what it's been used to do to people like me, right? That's what I know about it. But I also know that I have a lot of really awesome people of faith in my life who love me and affirm me. And those are the people I go by, when I think about faith. And so I think, what's that, Bobby?
Go ahead, finish.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think, but on the other side of things, I think this is really a great place for allies to step in and talk to faith-based communities about our community, because some of us just don't have the energy to say, why I don't understand why I have to tell you not to hate me. Like, I just don't have this energy. So I know when I was younger, I argued a lot more and I lost a lot of sleep over these arguments. And as I get older, I'm like, someone else can answer this question. Like, I am not dealing with that. So, but the relationship piece is probably the most important, was what Bobby said, for sure.
My favorite thing with this, there's a guy named Peter Goins. He has passed away now. He was a civil rights leader in the 60s, Harvard professor, absolutely amazing person. And he came out in the civil rights movement. And there was a reporter that asked him, what do you say to people who say that you cannot be a gay man and be Christian? And his response was, I offer my life to evidence of the contrary. And I think that was just the best response ever to
That's
that.
awesome. That's a good response.
It's amazing. Okay. Since we're kind of rushed on time, let's move on to the next question. Adam and Mickey, in the current popular media culture, including movies, TV news, internet, etc., are there any examples of sexuality being portrayed in ways that are helpful or harmful?
I mean, I think the classic gay trope on TV is you're either a joke or they kill you off in the third season. That tends to be what happens. It's getting a little bit better. There have been some positive representations, and there even from the not great representations, there can be like some good that comes out of it. So I grew up watching the L Word, and the L Word, as far as representation goes, is terrible in so many ways. And it was so impactful and so meaningful because I could see myself to some degree there. And it also really harmed me because Max is who I thought trans men were. And so I was like, I never want to be that. I can't be that. And totally like dismissed my entire identity for years. I think the best analysis that I've seen on this is Laverne Cox's Disclosure, which is on Netflix. She did a fantastic job with that. And she talks about intersectionality in terms of race, but also gender identity and different lenses. And it really breaks down so much that is so great. And I think a lot of the things that are out there just need to also be taken with a critical eye. So I know RuPaul is really popular. I don't like RuPaul at all. He is so problematic in so many ways. And his show has done, Drag Race has done so much to further acceptance of queer identity, to further visibility of queer identity, even though he has said some problematic things. There have been problematic things on his show. It's still like there has still been a lot of good that has come out of it. So when we're looking at this stuff, we just have to look at it with a critical eye and know that it's not, it's not perfect. There is no perfect representation out there. But one of the things that really stands out to me in Disclosure is they were talking about, problematic representations, like the way they portrayed Brandon Tina in Boys Don't Cry, and the way they portrayed Max in the L Word, and saying like, if we had more representation and it was just more normalized to have queer and trans folks in media, then, bungled or in some case mangled representations won't be as impactful. But when that's the only representation that we have, that's where it gets dangerous.
That is a lot of what I wanted to say. I think just to echo that just a little bit, a couple of things you can look out for when you're seeing when you're the viewer and you're looking at a portrayal and you're asking, is this a positive or a negative representation of someone who's queer? Look for characters that have full characters and full story arcs, that have more than one thing that's said about them. That's going to be a more positive representation. Look for characters that that have relationships that aren't either okay. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is a great example of positive representation in media. The character is Rosa. She is bi. She comes out somewhere in like the 4th or 5th season. So spoilers, I'm sorry. But you have this really great representation of how she deals with her family, how she first comes out at work and is received one way, and then she comes out with her family and is received in a different way. So stories that show the nuance of a queer identity, that show relationships in shades of gray, that there can be good things and bad things. Those are the stories that are really going to shine and are really going to probably come from writers and from people who have had those experiences. So just a couple other shout outs to, like, if you're looking for positive representation of queer people, TV is what I know. So these are all TV shows, but here they are. Brooklyn Nine-Nine I already talked about. The new Queer Eye is a great, like, nonfiction place to see, positive representations of queer people, and they discuss some really interesting things and come up with some very interesting, mostly very positive perspectives on what it's like to be queer and some of the things that people struggle with various queer identities. Um, Cartoons. So if you have a younger sibling, or if you're like me and you just like cartoons anyway, She-Ra, the new She-Ra cartoon is amazing for queer representation. It's one of the only non-binary characters I know in film right now, and it has a same gender romantic story arc that is both, like, I'm not going to spoil things, but it's everything you actually wanted it to be, and it wasn't queer baiting. That's a word that I shouldn't have said because we're not going to have time to fully go into what that means, but look it up if you're curious. And the last one's a little more mature, so it's not necessarily family friendly, but Pose is written and directed by a lot of trans women of color, and so those stories are very interesting, and they deal with things in a lot more complex way than you get in a lot of other film media right now. So if and when you're able to watch that, I highly recommend it. And I'll cede the floor here.
Adam, would you mind putting those suggestions in the chat? Because that seems to be where we're putting some helpful information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if anybody missed any of those and is interested in checking that out. I know we're at our time, but we have one last final question, and I want to make sure that we get a chance to answer that one. So Emma, go ahead.
Okay, Jess, in this holiday season, are there any common fears or struggles in the LGBTQ plus community? And how can those outside the community best address those or be supportive?
Yeah, this one's funny to me. I'm laughing because I worked in higher ed for years before moving to the county, and I feel like every October we'd be like, all right, we need to talk to the queers on campus, and we need to rally them and tell them that everything is going to be, we're going to help them, right? We're going to help them. And one of the things that we would actually tell them is to, like, take it down a notch and don't feel like you have to come out. Don't feel like you have to tell everyone right there that, like, your roommate is actually your girlfriend. Like, there is, I don't want to say that there is a time and place, but in some way for self-preservation, for your own mental health, not saying anything on Thanksgiving or on Christmas or on this big day, unless you are pretty confident that things are going to be cool. Sometimes I want to keep people safe. That's the mission, right? But I also think it is a really good time to pull that one cousin or one aunt and uncle aside, if we didn't have COVID, right? Like, think of the non-COVID days, where, we can pull that one cousin or uncle or something aside that we know that we love and trust, and tell them, because we haven't seen them all year, so it can be a really positive experience. But I mean, queer folks have a really long history of homelessness, and they make up a huge part of the homeless population, especially young trans folks. There's a lot of trans people who never, and queer people in general, who never get to go home because their families won't accept them, or don't accept their partner, or don't, for a million reasons. But one of the things that my mom has always done for years is she's like, do you got any strays or gays that want to come over this year? And for years, I just brought home queer people, like other queer students, when I was still a student. And I know that made them feel good, to have a place to go. So if you have the ability to give, if your families have the ability to offer that space, and again, I know we're living in different times, but if you have the ability to maybe, bring someone else in on your Zoom Christmas, being included during a holiday celebration feels really, really, really awesome. I think the other piece, and this is something that I'm learning this Christmas, and just this holiday season in general, is to redefine the way that I feel about holidays. And like, I know a lot of queer people who don't give a shit about Christmas or Thanksgiving, but they do like that family aspect. So is there another way you can get that feeling of belonging and redefine, just as we've redefined sexuality and gender and all these other things, right? Can you define how you want your own holiday? Make it your own. And that takes a while to get there, and I'm still trying to get there. And this year I feel like I have an opportunity to reset the clock a little bit, to be like, this is how I want my future holidays to be, because we all should be able to, to do that. But imagine if we didn't put as much pressure on these holidays as we do. And we can absolutely redefine how we think about things. So it's just a hard time, but if you can reach out and you can give and you can include, I highly recommend doing that. And Adam wants to.
Sorry, if I can add,
please.
that's all amazing. Though I was thinking about one more thing while you were talking about that. And that is, talking to people who are allies and want to be allies in their family. There may be someone at one of your holiday events, probably not this year with everything being smaller, but in the future, who's looking for that safe person to come out to.
100%.
And they won't know that that person is you unless you find a way to clue in that to everyone at the table that you are that safe person. Like, it doesn't have to be big and dramatic, but being vocally supportive of LGBT people in some way, even if, that's not, even if you're to you think entirely straight family, that might give someone that one little clue that, oh, I do have an ally here at the table. I do have a cousin that I can talk to. Finally, I've just been waiting, that can be really important and impactful.
Totally.
I also, sorry, I was just going to say that, I'm someone who, I would say that I'm a fairly private person, and I don't often reach out for help a lot when I'm struggling. And the holidays have always been hard for me, not because my family's not accepting, but because they tend to ignore things. So it's comfortable in the sense that we don't have to talk about it, but it's uncomfortable in the sense that it also feels like it's me having to deny who I am or not talk about it. And that has changed. And I'm getting married next year, so they're gonna have to get on board or get lost. So, but I used to have friends that would reach out to me just through a text or a phone call over the holidays that meant the world to me, just to see how it was going. They didn't actually know that I needed that. I was out to them, and they wanted to see how I was doing. So just knowing that the holidays might be harder for people, just check on your friends. Check on people that you haven't seen in a while. If you think about somebody, my rule of thumb is kind of just always send them something to let them know that. So that's kind of just my little piece of it, especially in 2020 when everybody is going through this kind of collective trauma. I think it's important.
I want to say that I also know it's not easy to tell your family to fuck off, and it's not easy, so if you were an ally, definitely not saying like, well, you don't have to be a part of that, blah, blah, blah. But I think it is okay to affirm, like Bethany, for you, I don't know your situation, but it's nice to hear that you're taking a stand and getting married, and you're not going to not accept this. Like, this is because that's just who you are, right? So at the end of the day, I hope young queer folks can get to the point where they can just go, like, what I am is not a bad thing. What I am is just what I am, and fuck everybody else. You know, because there are a lot of really awesome, beautiful, accepting, lovely people in this world. They just might not be in your family, and that sucks, but that's why a lot of queer folks have their own families and make their own families and pave their own way. But we're the right ones. We're the right ones. That's all there is to it. We're not wrong for living this way or being this way, or, you know, whatever. So we just have to keep telling people that they're not wrong. So.
All right. Well, we are over our time. I'm so sorry.
This was great.
If anybody has to jump off, you can certainly do so, but this is an important conversation. I knew we were going to be a little stretched with the amount of questions, but I think we did a great job to get everything in and get some answers out there, and a lot of great information too. So I don't know if Jillian or somebody can grab the information off the chat so that maybe we can include that elsewhere too, if anybody wants those resources. But personally, from me, thank you to the panelists who are my colleagues and friends and fellow queer folks. I really, really, really appreciate you and the time that you took out of your busy lives to have this very important conversation. It means a lot to me that people continue to answer my requests for volunteers for this and that, but I just want to create a space where we can have these conversations and we can really, really do some education for people that are open to listening. So, and I appreciate all the people who are either on this call or who are going to watch this later, who are open to listening and who are doing their best to learn and become an ally in whatever way that they can. So I appreciate you all.
This was really cool. Y'all are cool. This was great.
I also really want to thank you guys. Like, I just learned so much tonight, and my brain is like, with all these questions and like all these new answers, and now I'm thinking, and it's been such an amazing night, and to be here with you guys. I can't wait to, I'm so excited that so many people got to hear this and that they get this later as well, in case they couldn't be here tonight. So thank you so much.
If I wouldn't mind getting folks information if you wanted to I just put mine in the chat so you can find me if you have more questions. Or you can find me on Facebook too. I love to connect with new folks on Facebook. And that's how, Dr. Novotny and I have stayed friends, So.
So I just wanted to, in conclusion, really quick, just thank all of you, and also thank Emma for moderating tonight. And this is something that I am so inspired by every time we do these conversations calls. But this one for me, it was very timely because my 10-year-old told me last week that he wasn't going to play Fortnite with his friends anymore. And I said, why? And he said, because they call each other gay, and it really gets to me. And so, like, after I was in a mom puddle for a second and came back to reality, I just thought, like, what do I do with that? And so I just love this conversation. I love that, sometimes we live in our own little bubbles in Carter County and feel like, I don't know what we feel like, but just having you all and hearing your stories and just so impactful. And I know that lots and lots of people will see this from this recording too. And just to very, very quickly share kind of some of the things that we're doing in Carter County that we would love your support with, or for Emma and McKenna, who is also on this call, are working really hard to start a GSA in Carter County that will be virtual, and so really can be accessible to anyone. One of our schools in our community had kind of a group that met in the afternoons, and since everything is virtual and changing, they've really lost that support, and so we want to be able to step in and provide that. So we would like to start that in January, and so we really appreciate you helping spread the word about that, or hopping on with us. And we are all just allies trying to do something cool and do something helpful. So we just appreciate y'all being part of this with us and walking beside us, so that we can do these things the right way and really love some kids and support them that way. We also have a mentoring program in Carter County, and one of the things that we are really in need of is mentors for kids that identify as LGBTQ. Most of them have expressed an interest in only being matched with a mentor that understands them, or can kind of understand where they're coming from or whatever. And so if there are people that you know that would like to spend an hour a week with a kid, really we leave it up to you what you do. We try to match people that are similar in interest. So if what you want to do is go fishing, then go fishing. Or if you want to go work out, you go work out. And so that's something that we really are in need of in Carter County. If you have resources, either for mentees, kids that would benefit, or for mentors that would like to meet with kiddos. And then the last thing that I just want to add is that McKenna and Emma are part of an amazing program with Cindy at Rise. They're peer sexuality educators. And so I know that Bethany got to spend a little bit of time with them answering questions and sharing more info with them. But please know that if you ever have ideas or needs or opportunities for youth to be involved in this work, we have an amazing group of kids who are super passionate about this and super educated about these things and are growing and learning all the time. And so we would love to partner with you. There's more information about all of the programs that they offer at risehfl.org. They're also doing some amazing work with comprehensive sexuality education in the community, and just collaboration and all kinds of awesome stuff. So our website is cartercountydrugprevention.org. I just shared Cindy's with you, and thank you all. Thank you. This has been just really helpful and impactful and inspiring and all of the awesome things. So thank you for being here, and yeah, I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you.
It's been
Bye, everyone.
wonderful.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.